My name is Jaalah, and this is my story of deliverance from depression and anxiety and suicidality. So, I guess I was pretty depressed as a kid. Growing up in the summers, my mom was always really concerned about me because I would go from just being joyful and life filled to not kind of having that same life in my eyes. And if I didn't have enough to do, I was just always, really sad. So that was kind of a consistent thing throughout my childhood growing up. By the time I made it to high school, I was pretty depressed, pretty angry, really irritable. It was not a fantastic time in my life for sure. And I had grown up in a Christian home and, had those values instilled in me as a child. But I guess growing up all the way up until high school, it didn't really feel like my faith was really my own. So after high school, I went to a Bible college for 2 years, the first of which was pretty life-changing. It was pretty awesome. I dedicated my life to Christ. I was baptized, and I was really discovering kind of the freedom that was possible with the Lord. So it was really positive for that first kind of few months, and then COVID hit and everyone was sent home, and that was kind of a dagger, and the depression came back really hard, and just the isolation that I was feeling was really intense. It felt like my joy was just completely stolen. So that kind of era of COVID going into my second year of university was not a great year. I ended up deciding not to go back and just to stay home for the next year and go to school in my hometown. But one other thing that was occurring while I just made that decision to stay home was my sister was really sick. And I'm just going to put a little preface in here. I think she's on the podcast before me. Anyways, she was really sick. She was going through a really rough couple of years with chronic seizures that were unexplainable medically. So pretty much every night I would be with her, kind of taking care of her, administering medications, and kind of trying to keep her alive. So that was a really tricky time, a really dark era for me and her and our whole family. And it kind of felt like God wasn't really in the picture. There's only, I guess, so many times that you can pray healing over someone and not see it, that it's hard to kind of keep faith in the fact that he was close by. And so everything became very cynical in our house, and there was just a lot of darkness, a lot of tension in relationships. It was a really hard time for us for sure. And then in the last kind of year, I was diagnosed with ADHD along with a few of my family members. And that was a really exciting diagnosis because it felt like it kind of described a lot of the things that I had been dealing with for a lot of years. Distraction and brain fog and a lot of fatigue as well, and just a lack of ability to focus on anything. So that diagnosis was really encouraging. So I was excited to get on meds for that, to try that out and see if that would solve all of my problems. And it didn't. I developed a lot of anxiety after starting on those medications. A lot of eating disorder stuff came up that was present when I was younger and throughout high school, that it just kind of all came to the surface at once. And so that time was just one that was really difficult and really stress-filled. I think in general, my perception of myself was pretty negative, and I, despite being able to get more done on the meds, I guess, I was still really anxious, feeling really depressed, and that's kind of where the suicidality kind of came in as well. There were, I guess, few relationships that kind of were a catalyst for some of that suicidal ideation and really were pretty negative for my mental health overall. And during that time of anxiety and panic attacks and all of that, I kind of had some memories of some trauma come up that I hadn't known about before then, and that was pretty scary. It felt very kind of paralyzing, and like I wasn't in control of myself. I wasn't in control of my mind, and I wasn't in control of my own future. I think that looking to the future at that point in time wasn't really something that I was able to do. Yeah, I started going to therapy, and it was good, I guess, to be able to talk through things, but it felt like everything we talked through there wasn't really a solution for. And so in some ways it made things feel even more helpless, and like I wasn't really able to get anywhere. There weren't really, I guess, any answers to the questions that I had, and there wasn't any solutions to the problems that I was facing. And obviously the meds had kind of made things worse, and so I was at the point where I was considering mixing up my medications and seeing if that would help with anxiety and all those things, but didn't actually get that far, because it was around that time that my sister came home telling me about her deliverance from her sickness. And that was a pretty crazy moment for her, obviously, but for me as well. And I think that it kind of shifted my entire paradigm for the way that I was looking at life in general. I had never considered anything along the lines of spiritual warfare. I had no idea that, those things were important or could impact anything. You hear people talking about guardian angels, and, within the context of Christianity, I feel like there is a decent mention of angels in visiting people in the Bible all the time. And it just seemed like something that was from the past and really not relevant to our everyday lives. But I think that what my sister's deliverance did was it opened up all of our eyes for me and my whole family to what we were actually dealing with. And it's kind of like an undeniable testimony as to the reality of the significance of spiritual warfare that's affecting us today. And I think that it was pretty inspiring and pretty life-changing to hear from her. For the first few days after my sister was delivered, I was really excited. I was kind of pondering what all of this would mean for me and for my family as well. And then there were a couple days after that I started to feel just kind of resentful and frustrated and irritated every time she would bring something up about demons and her deliverance and all of this. I was like, okay, well, what even is that? And I felt myself start to regard it differently. I remember it was the Tuesday after the Friday that she was delivered, and I was at school, and I was considering all these things. I was talking to a friend about it, and I was considering my resistance to it that had kind of developed. And I was talking to her, and I just said, if all of this is real and it really happened to her, then the only reason that I would be feeling resistant to it is because there are things in me that I also need to be delivered from. And so I think that the urgency that came with that was, if I am being oppressed and if there are demons that need to be cast out of me as well, I can't wait for that. That needs to happen immediately. And I just didn't really know how to go about that. And I got a call from my sister on my way home, and she said, I'm bringing mom down. I'm going to tell her my story, because she hadn't told my mom about her deliverance. So she was like, I'm going to bring her down. I think if you want to be there, you should totally be there. And I was like, I don't really want to, that's fine. So I was really reluctant to go, but I ended up going down and rehearing her whole story. And she went into a lot of detail about kind of the medical history that was a precursor to her deliverance as well, which I knew about, but I hadn't really had a summary of. So she went through all of that, and I just remember thinking, my mom needs deliverance. Why isn't she asking for that? Why isn't she admitting that she needs it? This needs to happen. I guess the second thought that came to me after that was, okay, I need it. If she needs it, I definitely also need it. And so, yeah, and then my sister finished her story, and she kind of looked at me. She's like, what are you thinking? And I was like, man, I think I need deliverance. So she beckoned me over. She's like, okay, come on, then let's do it. And I was like, what? We can just do it right now? So we started praying. I was crying a whole bunch. And actually, at first, got like really dark during that prayer. And we paused after a little bit. And I just felt like the most dissociative that I've ever felt. Like, we kept praying, like paralysis that I was feeling totally just left me, and I just was able to lift my arms, actually pray out loud. I felt like I was able to talk again and move again. And by the time we finished praying, I was looking around, and it was like I was seeing the world for the first time. I actually remember our other sister was on the phone while we were praying, and I looked over at her face, and it genuinely felt like I was seeing her for the first time. We'd had like a really rough relationship because she was really kind of in the spirit and really passionate about the Bible and Jesus and her relationship with him, and that was something that was like a really big trigger for me. And so yeah, there was a lot of tension there for years, and just opening my eyes and being able to look over at her, and I was like, is that you? And one really cool thing that happened later that night is we were all chatting, and we were talking about how my dad needed deliverance as well. We were like, I think he's next. And my sister just mentioned that she had asked him to fast earlier that day, and he had just gone right for it. And like, she was just commending him basically for his obedience to the Lord and the Spirit. And I was like, yeah, that's so cool. And then I was like, wait a second. Why did you ask him to fast? And she kind of looked over at me. She's like, oh yeah, B and I were praying about it, and yeah, I knew that you were going to ask for deliverance tonight. And I was like, no way, that's insane. So it was pretty cool. And I think the next morning I woke up and I was feeling alive and like glad to be alive for the first time probably in my life. Like, waking up in the morning has always been like the worst part of my day, and just a battle every single time. And it felt like, yeah, for the first time I was actually just able to like look around me with gratitude and like new eyes for everything that I was seeing. And it's been pretty crazy ever since. Pretty much I've been sharing my story and my sister's with everyone that I come across. I think it's impossible to keep in when you've like seen, you've witnessed something like that. Just like the number of years that things were so dark for both me and her, that shift happening so drastically it's just like an undeniable testimony to the Lord's power, and also to just the reality of the spiritual realm and the importance of it. And sharing a lot about that, been spending a lot of time with the Lord, trying to fight strongholds that have tried to, reinsert themselves into my life. But I think just the severity with which my sister was delivered is just such an incredible reminder of the faithfulness of the Lord and how real all of this is, and how important it is just to cling to him. One significant thing that happened after my deliverance was I was baptized in the Holy Spirit, and I didn't really know what that meant before my deliverance, and I had heard of people speaking in tongues, but didn't really think that was something for me, and didn't really think that was like super relevant to my life. But yeah, after my sister's deliverance, she came back and was talking all about it and how she can speak in tongues now, and I was like, okay. And I was like, that's really great for you. And she's like, no, God has it for all of us. And I was like, no, what? And then, yeah, after my deliverance, I just had like this certainty that it had happened, but I hadn't really tried it out, I guess, yet. And then it was the next day, and my dad came down he wanted deliverance as well. So he came down, and me and B and my sister all started praying for him. And so they both started speaking in tongues, and I was like, yeah, all right, now is as great a time as ever. So I just went for it. It was really just absolutely incredible. I felt the Holy Spirit was just dwelling in that place, and my whole body was just like chills all over. And we were praying, we had worship music on. My dad started crying, and then he got up and started dancing. And one of like those moments that I'm never gonna forget. Yeah, it was pretty incredible. And so yeah, I think that the gift of tongues was honestly, it has been so incredible for my relationship with the Lord and totally changed the way that I'm able to live. I think that in every context now, I'm like muttering under my breath in tongues if I'm feeling like I'm like under attack, or there's anything in whatever space that I'm in that's not of the Lord. And it's been really just an incredible way to reset and reconnect just immediately with the Lord. And it's also opened the door for prophetic words and images that he has for both me and other people, and being able to be able to speak in tongues, and then be able to be praying over someone and have like 2 or 3 different people having the same image or the same word the Holy Spirit has given to each of us is like one of the most wild experiences. And I think it's just allowed me to be able to see the world through his eyes, which is really cool, and just like invite him in every single space that I'm in, and just being able to ask him what prayer is needed for the people around me, and like what he wants to say to the people around me. And I think it's just allowed my faith to become a part of the fabric of my everyday life. So that's been pretty epic.